Have you ever sat alone and wondered, what if I did everything I was supposed to do and it still isn't enough? Maybe you've worked for 40 years. Maybe you've saved what you could. Maybe you've raised children, paid bills, made sacrifices, and done your best to be responsible. And yet as retirement gets closer, or perhaps now that you're already retired, you still find yourself worrying about inflation, worrying about market crashes, worrying about whether your money will last longer than you do. And perhaps the hardest question of all, what if I make a mistake now when I can least afford one? Let me tell you something. Many retirees struggle with this, not because they're careless, not because they're bad with money, but because the world of investing often feels designed to confuse ordinary people. Every day there's another expert, another prediction, another warning, another headline telling you what stock to buy, what stock to sell, and why disaster is right around the corner. After a while, it becomes exhausting. You stop feeling informed. You start feeling overwhelmed. That's exactly why I decided to read A Random Walk Down Wall Street by Burton G. Malkiel. Now, I expected another investment book, another book filled with complicated charts and financial jargon. But what surprised me was something much deeper. This book wasn't really about getting rich quickly. It wasn't about beating everyone else. It wasn't about becoming some investing genius. Instead, it challenged one of the biggest fears many people carry throughout life, the fear that we're always one mistake away from financial disaster. And as I read it, I couldn't stop thinking about retirees, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, people who have less time to recover from financial mistakes, people who want peace more than excitement, people who no longer dream about becoming millionaires overnight. They simply want security, dignity, freedom, and the ability to sleep well at night. This part really made me stop and think. Because sometimes the greatest financial wisdom isn't about making more money. Sometimes it's about worrying less. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Not just what this book teaches about investing, but what it teaches about retirement, about aging, about peace of mind, about avoiding unnecessary stress, and about building a life that feels secure even when the future remains uncertain. So grab a cup of coffee, settle into your chair, and let's talk about the 7 retirement lessons I learned from A Random Walk Down Wall Street. Some of them surprised me. A few challenged things I believed for years, and one lesson in particular may completely change the way you think about money in retirement. Why this book matters for retirees. One of the biggest misunderstandings people have about retirement is believing that retirement is mostly a money problem. Now, don't get me wrong, money matters a lot, but after talking with retirees over the years, I've noticed something interesting. The people who worry the most aren't always the people with the least money. Sometimes they're the people carrying the most uncertainty. They don't know what the future will bring. They don't know what the market will do. They don't know whether they're making the right decisions. And uncertainty can be exhausting, especially as we get older. Most people don't realize this until later in life. When you're younger, you can recover from mistakes. You have decades ahead of you. You can start over. You can take risks. But retirement changes the equation. Now every decision feels heavier. Every market drop feels scarier. Every financial headline feels more personal. That's why this book matters. Because at its heart, this book addresses a simple question. How do ordinary people build financial security without constantly trying to predict the future? And that's a question every retiree should care about. Think about it. Maybe you're living on a fixed income. Maybe you're helping adult children. Maybe you're caring for a spouse. Maybe you're facing medical expenses. Maybe you're worried about inflation eating away at your savings. Or perhaps you've reached retirement only to discover something nobody talks about enough. That financial stress doesn't automatically disappear when work stops. In some ways, it becomes more emotional because now your savings represent something bigger. They represent safety, independence, options, peace of mind. This book offers a refreshing perspective. It reminds us that nobody consistently predicts markets. Nobody consistently knows what's coming next. And trying to outsmart the future often creates more stress than success. I wish more people understood this before retirement, because many retirees spend years chasing certainty, when what they really need is a system that works even when certainty doesn't exist. What the book is really about, if I had to explain the core idea of A Random Walk Down Wall Street in one simple sentence, it would be this. The future is far less predictable than most people think. That's it. That's the heart of the book. The author spends much of the book challenging the idea that experts can consistently predict which investments will outperform. He explores market history, investment trends, financial bubbles, speculation, and the endless cycle of people believing they've discovered a secret formula. Yet over and over again, history teaches the same lesson. Very few people consistently beat the market over long periods of time, and even fewer do it after fees, taxes, and mistakes are considered. Now that might sound discouraging, but I actually found it comforting because it removes a burden many people carry, the burden of feeling like they must always know more, must always predict more, must always stay one step ahead. The book suggests something radically simple. Instead of trying to be smarter than everyone else, create a strategy that doesn't depend on being smarter. And honestly, that's a lesson that extends far beyond investing. Think about life. Many of our biggest regrets come from believing we could control things that were never truly under our control. Other people's decisions, economic conditions, unexpected events, health challenges. Life has a way of humbling all of us. And this book acknowledges that reality, not with fear, but with acceptance. That's what resonated with me. It doesn't promise certainty. It teaches resilience. And retirement isn't about certainty, it's about resilience. The biggest lessons I learned from this book. Lesson #1, stop trying to predict the future. This may be the most important lesson in the entire book, and it's one retirees especially need to hear. The truth is, nobody knows what the market will do next year. Nobody knows what inflation will do. Nobody knows which stock will be the next winner. Nobody knows what economic surprise is waiting around the corner. Yet every day, millions of people make decisions as if someone does. They listen to experts, they watch financial television, they follow predictions. They search endlessly for certainty, but certainty never arrives. This reminded me of something much bigger than investing. As we age, we often become obsessed with preparing for every possible future. What if I need long-term care? What if my investments drop? What if I outlive my savings? What if something happens to my spouse? These are real concerns, important concerns. But sometimes we spend so much time worrying about future possibilities that we lose today's peace. The book reminded me that successful investing isn't about predicting every outcome. It's about preparing for uncertainty. And retirement works the same way. The retirees who seem most at peace aren't necessarily the ones who predicted everything correctly. They're often the ones who built lives flexible enough to handle surprises. That distinction matters, because life will surprise all of us eventually. Lesson #2, simplicity often wins. This lesson hit me harder than I expected, because we live in a world that constantly tells us more complexity equals more value, more strategies, more products, more opinions, more predictions, more information. But according to the book, simple investment approaches often outperform complicated ones over long periods. Think about that. The financial industry frequently rewards complexity, but real success often comes from simplicity. And honestly, retirement teaches the same lesson. Many retirees discover that happiness becomes simpler. You no longer need as much. You begin valuing quiet mornings, meaningful conversations, good health, time with family, peaceful routines. The simple things become the rich things. I remember speaking with a retiree who spent years chasing investment opportunities. He was always researching, always trading, always worried. Eventually, he simplified everything. And you know what surprised him? His portfolio improved. But more importantly, his stress disappeared. Sometimes simplicity isn't about earning more. Sometimes it's about suffering less. And that's a lesson worth remembering. Lesson #3. The cost of being wrong gets bigger in retirement. This is where the book's message becomes especially relevant for older adults. When you're 30 years old, a bad investment decision can often be corrected. You have time. Time is powerful, but retirement changes that reality. A major loss can have consequences that last for years. That doesn't mean retirees should avoid investing altogether. Not at all. It simply means protecting capital becomes more important than chasing excitement. Many people spend their working years trying to maximize returns. Retirement often requires a different mindset. Now, the goal shifts towards sustainability, consistency, reliability, peace of mind. This is something many retirees misunderstand. They think they still need to hit home runs, but sometimes the smartest move is simply staying in the game, avoiding catastrophic mistakes, preserving flexibility, protecting what you've already built. And that realization alone can remove a tremendous amount of pressure. Lesson #4. Emotional decisions are often expensive. This lesson may not be the most obvious one in the book, but it might be one of the most important. The author spends a great deal of time explaining how investors often hurt themselves, not because they're unintelligent, but because they're emotional. They buy when everyone is excited. They sell when everyone is afraid. They chase trends, they panic during downturns, and in the process, they end up doing the exact opposite of what helps them succeed. Now, let me tell you something. This isn't just an investing problem, it's a human problem, and retirement can make emotions even stronger. When you're retired, your savings aren't just numbers on a screen. They represent security, independence, your ability to pay bills, your ability to travel, your ability to help your family. So when markets fall, it feels personal. I understand that. Most retirees do. I remember hearing about people during major market downturns who couldn't sleep at night. They checked their accounts several times a day. Every headline felt like a threat. Every news report created more anxiety. But what stood out to me while reading this book was a simple realization. Markets often recover. Panic decisions often don't. Many retirees struggle with this because fear feels like action. Selling feels like protection. Doing something feels better than doing nothing. But sometimes the wisest action is patience. Sometimes the greatest financial skill isn't intelligence. It's emotional discipline. And honestly, that applies to much more than money. It applies to relationships, health decisions, family conflicts, life itself. The older I get, the more I realize that emotional reactions create many of our biggest regrets. Learning to pause before reacting may be one of the most valuable retirement skills of all. Lesson #5. You don't need to be a financial genius. This lesson felt surprisingly liberating. For years, many people have been made to feel that successful investing requires special knowledge, that you need to study markets every day, read endless reports, watch financial news constantly, follow experts, analyze charts, and somehow become an amateur economist. But one of the strongest messages in this book is that ordinary people don't need extraordinary expertise to build wealth over time. Think about how comforting that is, especially for retirees. Many older adults worry they've missed something. They think, I should know more, I should understand investing better, I should have started earlier, I should be smarter with money. Be honest with yourself. Have you ever thought those things? Many people have. But this book challenges that thinking. It reminds us that financial success often comes from consistency rather than brilliance, from patience rather than prediction, from discipline rather than genius. And that's encouraging because discipline is available to everyone. You don't need a finance degree. You don't need to sit in front of stock charts all day. You don't need to become obsessed with market forecasts. You simply need a sensible approach and the willingness to stick with it. This lesson also connects to aging in a deeper way. Because getting older often means letting go of the need to prove ourselves. We stop trying to impress people. We stop trying to be the smartest person in the room. We become more comfortable with simplicity, more comfortable with humility, more comfortable admitting what we don't know. And strangely enough, that mindset often leads to better decisions, not worse ones. Lesson 6. Time is more powerful than talent. One thing that becomes painfully clear while reading this book is the extraordinary power of time. Not talent, not luck, not intelligence. Time. And for retirees, this lesson can create mixed emotions. Some viewers may think, well, that's nice, but I don't have 30 years left to invest. And that's true. Retirement changes our relationship with time, but there is still wisdom here because the lesson extends beyond investing. The book shows how small, consistent decisions made over long periods can create remarkable outcomes. And isn't that true of life itself? Think about your health. A short walk every day may not seem important, but over 10 years, it matters. Think about relationships. A weekly phone call to a friend may seem small, but over time, it strengthens bonds. Think about marriage, family, faith, purpose. The most meaningful parts of life are rarely built in dramatic moments. They're built gradually, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one habit at a time. Most people don't realize this until later in life. They spend years looking for breakthroughs, but real transformation often comes from consistency. This part really made me stop and think. Because retirement is often portrayed as a finish line, but it isn't. It's another chapter, another opportunity to benefit from small decisions made repeatedly, whether that's exercise, learning, friendships, volunteering, or managing money wisely. The principle remains the same. Small actions accumulate, and over time they shape our lives. Lesson #7, peace of mind is an investment too. This was perhaps my favorite lesson, not because the book says these exact words, but because it's what I kept feeling while reading it. Peace of mind matters a lot, especially after 60, especially after retirement. When we're younger, we often focus entirely on growth. More money, more success, more achievement, more accumulation, but retirement changes our priorities. Now we start asking different questions. Can I sleep at night? Can I enjoy my mornings? Can I spend time with family without constant financial worry? Can I live without fear? Can I enjoy the years I worked so hard to reach? Those questions matter. And sometimes chasing higher returns comes at the cost of lower peace. Now, that doesn't mean retirees should avoid investing. It means every financial decision should be viewed through a different lens, not just how much could I make, but also how much stress will this create? Because money has a purpose. And the purpose isn't endless accumulation. The purpose is supporting a meaningful life, supporting freedom, supporting dignity, supporting peace. I wish more people understood this before retirement. Many spend decades chasing wealth and very little time learning how to enjoy it. Yet peace of mind may be one of the greatest returns any investment can produce. What this book gets right about life, one thing I deeply appreciate about this book is that it understands something many people resist. Life is uncertain. And uncertainty is not a temporary problem, it's a permanent reality. No matter how much money we have, no matter how intelligent we are, no matter how carefully we plan, there will always be unknowns, health surprises, economic surprises, family surprises, life surprises. You that is watching this right now probably know that better than most younger people, because you've lived long enough to see plans change. You've seen expectations fail. You've seen circumstances shift unexpectedly, and perhaps that's why this book resonates so strongly with older adults. It doesn't pretend uncertainty can be eliminated. It teaches us how to live with it. Another thing the book gets right is humility. The older I get, the more I respect humble people. People who admit they don't know everything. People who understand their limitations. People who remain open to learning. The book repeatedly reminds readers that confidence and correctness are not the same thing. And that's a lesson that applies far beyond investing. Some of the wisest people I've met are not the loudest. They're often the most thoughtful, the most patient, the most humble, the most willing to say, I don't know, that's a strength, not a weakness, things I disagreed with or questioned. Now, let's be fair, no book is perfect, and I think it's important to discuss where readers should be thoughtful. One concern I had is that some retirees may hear the book's message and conclude that investing is almost entirely mechanical, that emotions don't matter, that life circumstances don't matter, that everyone should follow exactly the same path. I don't think that's true. Real life is more complicated. People have different health situations, different family responsibilities, different income needs, different risk tolerances. A 75-year-old widow may have very different priorities than a 60-year-old retiree with a pension and excellent health. Another thing worth mentioning is that investing isn't the only ingredient of a successful retirement. The book understandably focuses on markets and financial decisions, but retirement itself is much bigger. I've met retirees with significant savings who were lonely. I've met retirees with modest savings who were genuinely happy. Money matters, absolutely, but purpose matters too. Relationships matter, health matters, community matters, meaning matters. A retirement plan that ignores those areas is incomplete. So while I respect the book tremendously, I believe retirees should view financial wisdom as only one piece of a much larger life puzzle. How this book changed my thinking. The biggest change this book created in me wasn't financial, it was emotional. It reminded me that certainty is often an illusion, and chasing certainty can become exhausting. For years, many of us searched for guarantees, the perfect investment, the perfect plan, the perfect prediction, the perfect answer. But life rarely works that way. Instead of searching for certainty, I've become more interested in building resilience, being adaptable, being prepared, being patient, being calm. This book reinforced the idea that successful investing isn't about predicting every storm. It's about building a ship capable of surviving storms. And honestly, that's how I now think about retirement. Retirement isn't about creating a perfect future. It's about creating a stable foundation, one strong enough to handle whatever the future brings. If retirees can take one practical action from this discussion today, it might simply be this: focus less on predicting, focus more on preparing. The difference is enormous. One creates anxiety, the other creates confidence. Final takeaways for retirees. If I could summarize everything I learned from a random walk down Wall Street into a few simple retirement lessons, it would be these. You do not need to predict the future to prepare for it. Simple often beats complicated. Avoiding big mistakes is sometimes more important than chasing big wins. Emotional decisions are often expensive. Patience is more valuable than most people realize. Peace of mind deserves a place in every financial plan. Money matters, but how you feel about your money matters too. Retirement is not about winning a competition. It's about creating a life that feels secure, meaningful and peaceful. And perhaps most importantly, the goal isn't to control every outcome. The goal is to remain steady when outcomes cannot be controlled. Closing, warm plus encouraging, community-driven. As we come to the end of this discussion, I want to leave you with one final thought. Most of us spend our younger years trying to build a life. Retirement gives us the opportunity to appreciate the life we've built. And that's a very different thing. The older I get, the less interested I become in chasing certainty, and the more interested I become in protecting peace. This book reminded me of that, not because it offered magical answers, but because it offered a healthier way of thinking about uncertainty. And perhaps that's one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves as we age, the ability to live wisely even when we don't know exactly what comes next. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What retirement lesson has life taught you that you wish you had learned earlier? Have you read A Random Walk Down Wall Street? Did any of these lessons resonate with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience may help someone else who is quietly struggling with the same questions. And if you enjoy thoughtful conversations about retirement, money, purpose, happiness, aging and living well in later life, be sure to subscribe and join our community. We're all learning together, we're all growing together, and none of us has to figure it all out alone. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people you love, and remember, a successful retirement is not measured by how much money you accumulate. It's measured by how much peace, freedom, purpose, and gratitude you experience along the way.